All right. So I was kind of thinking, so since I skipped out last week, I was kind of thinking about going through giving this week. So the way that the small group time goes is there's a conclusion, and I was kind of thinking about doing the conclusion with going next week. Does anyone have a problem with that? Do you think that's pretty good? Like that's, and so I was kind of thinking about doing that and doing the conclusion and going all at the same time, because we're in our books, we're in the last week right now. So all those things, like, and I already have the sermon written for this Sunday, and it's not a red letter, not a red letter one. We're going back to the Say What, like, sermon series. I don't know if you guys remember that from the lockdown. We did it in the lockdown, like, say what? That's not in the Bible. And this week is the devil made me do it. And so like that's and so we're getting ready for the devil made me do it this week. And so that'll be good. That'll be good. Okay, so we have this. So we start this with the normal red letter challenge stuff. Like, what are ideas that they're bringing presented to you, or anything like that you kind of struggle with? What is something that's God revealed to you during all this? How's it all going for you? Anything?
This was the easiest one for me.
The giving one?
Yeah.
Really?
Serving, I thought, would be.
Yeah.
Because that with mercy are like supposed to be really high on my list of things I do. But when I got into the giving one, it just seemed like, oh
yeah.
So easy. And food, the only problem I had is sometimes you have to decide how much or whether to give to that one or that one.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm giving to church, we have our own disaster relief group. So do the Lions.
Mm-hmm.
Am I splitting the wealth, or what am I doing? That's kind of where my head is for that.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I get that. Yeah.
Oh, I was always more comfortable giving through the church. I always felt that it went to where it was supposed to go. Yeah. If you go get some of these envelopes in the mail, you're not sure.
You're not sure.
They're modified,
Yeah. Yeah, we tried to, Meshach has done some stuff lately that has bolstered my confidence in him, and so we try to give some of that to him, but also to Lutheran disaster relief,
right,
and things like that, stuff with Haiti, and so he's done a couple things. I'm like, you didn't have to do that, like that. That's, no one was expecting that, and he kind of did it anyway. So, which is good. Was there anything else to kind of think about it? Like Zach, the author, says that after reading the words of Jesus, it's impossible to be a stingy Christian. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
A what Christian?
Stingy.
Oh.
I kind of agree with that.
You agree with that? Yeah.
I'm on a personal basis, or
well, just like,
in other words, if the average person would read Jesus, would that make them open their pocketbook? My personal opinion is no.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
You bring up a good point about the attitude of the leaders, and their relationship with giving can strongly affect the people that are under them.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's
No, I agree with that. And I think he's kind of talking about definitely folks have had a heart change.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's made a change in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not something where, like, when I do the monthly budget, that's one of the first. It's not, okay, what do we have left at the end of, it's first.
It should be first.
It's the mortgage, which we don't have right now. So it's the savings account, the church, and then whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
But it's norm. It's not,
and I think, and
it's not, it's not, I got to put this much aside. It's not one of the things we say, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to do this month or that?
Yeah.
It's the staple.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I really look at it is like our giving is good. It's also talking about money, like that's just that whole thing that it kind of comes back to that thing that you're serving. And if you're primarily serving and looking after yourself, like this, it's hard to give to other things like that. It's hard to release that because I think there's some part of us that's like, well, I have to hoard or something like that. And so, yeah, I think that's part of it where it's like, okay, I'll be okay. And I think that's the whole idea. And we're actually going to read that here in a little bit about the woman and then her mites that she gave that, that she gave so much. And I think that's kind of a testament to like, she'll be okay.
Oh,
no, you're fine.
The most profound thing I found that touched me was I was going through that chapter, day 30, where the story of the man who's about to die.
Okay, yeah.
And it ends in pavement.
Yeah.
That went boing.
Yeah. Like that's.
Not,
so he dies and it's just all pavement. Yeah, that's
He's allowed to take one suitcase to heaven.
Maybe the one.
Yeah.
He takes all bricks.
Which is kind of fun. Which is a funny way of. Why
That hit me boing. I had my little.
That was funny.
Yeah. So it's all just pavement and all that. Yeah. That's good. Let's see. Do you have a time in your life when you've been stingy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone have any interesting stories around that?
I think it was just a change in where I was with God.
Yeah.
That the stinginess was normal until the relationship became firm. Then that giving became the norm.
Yeah.
So because before that it was, we have to remember too, I'm starting off Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
So, it was like, I remember watching a program and they're talking about the private art gallery of the Pope. And things like that would affect me. I would say, the church is saying give, and here the Pope has a multi-million-dollar private library for his enjoyment. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
And that would affect my giving. Where when it became no longer Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, whatever, when it became the relationship with God, then everything changed.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny you say that. That's one of the key things that we were talking about with the devil made me do it, is that when we blame other people for our own lack of wanting to do something, so like it's easy to point out where it's like, well, they're going to misuse it, and we kind of equate that with that idea of the devil made me do it. It's like someone else's sin, someone else's bad. I'm not the one at fault. Like I look back at it, and this is a hard one for me, but like I look back at how I've treated some friends over the years. Like there's some people that I just kind of cut out of my life just because I kind of got tired of it all. And I kind of realize now that it probably wasn't the best thing to be doing, that I was kind of being selfish. And that there's a nuance to that, because sometimes you do have to get people out. But yeah, I have one of my conference sermons is kind of about all that. And that's something that kind of has affected me, and I think what helped me see it is like I could see how I was used by a few people when I was younger, and I was like, oh, that didn't feel good. You being used as a stepping stone and things like that. So I don't know, and I think that's all kind of part of giving, because it's not just money, it's time, talents.
And giving credit where credit is due.
Yeah, exactly. Like being able to, and one of the things I kind of talked about it a little bit in that sermon, but one of the things I also talk about with this story coming up, actually, it's just, well, before we get into the story, because we're going to read it in a second, we'll do the video here in a second, is Jesus is yelling at all of the Pharisees and all that stuff, because they're taking the temple treasury and they're kind of doing what they want with it. And I said, when that lady put in her 3 cents into there, which was everything she had, did that mean that it was going to be spent well?
No.
And like I try to confront the confirmation students that it's like, sometimes the most important thing is it's our own selves and being able to give. Sure, we should try to find the best places, but sometimes it's like, oh, well, they're just not going to spend it well, and so we don't. And I don't think your first reaction is, oh, well, they're not going to spend it well. Now that's like, I hate saying stuff like that, because I could easily hide as a church admin and go, well, just give anyway, no matter what we do with it, type of thing. I could hide behind that statement, but I don't desire to hide behind that. But I do think for our own spiritual sakes, like our first reaction is to give, and then kind of figure out where it can go. Does that make sense? So there's
trust involved with that too.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a trust in your future ability to live. That
God has his hand in it.
Yeah, and that no matter, even if it goes into the temple treasury and it's spent like garbage, that God still has his hand in it. And that God can
if I have a quick minute and I have to decide, I do a quick prayer.
Yeah.
And then usually there's some sort of I get a feeling, a vibe, a sign, or see something that says yes or no to me, and I go with that.
Yeah. So that's good. That's good. Does anyone else have any thoughts before we do the whole video here? Let me make sure I got it on the right one.
So today we are at the Springs, and the Springs remind me of giving, which is our fourth principle in the Red Letter Challenge of the things that Jesus invites his followers to practice. Jesus actually talks more about money and giving than any of the other principles, and so it's an extremely important topic that we have to discuss. But when we talk about money, especially as Christians, there's real hesitation when it comes to money. And there's many reasons why, but I think there's two main reasons. And the first reason is that some of us have given our hard-earned dollars and seen those dollars misused or abused. I was watching a show on an airplane flying back once and just stumbled upon this show about the lavish lifestyle of these mega church preachers. So think luxury in the Lord, think Bentleys and Bibles. And for whatever reason, it just did not sit well with me. There was something inside of me that says, this isn't right. And if I knew my money was going to something like this, or a person like this, or an organization or ministry like this, I don't know that I would want to give either. But the second main reason that I think we struggle with money and giving and even talking about it, is because money's an idol for us. It's probably the biggest idol we have in our lives. And it's tough to talk about something that's so personal, that's such a part of our life. But the more I read through the words of Jesus, if you read all of his words and you see the frequency of which he talks about this, man, I am convinced it is impossible to be a stingy Christian. And there's a lot of areas where Christians like to take real firm black and white stances on areas that I think are gray. Giving is one of those areas I think a lot of people think is gray, that actually, if you look at the words of Jesus, is kind of a black and white issue. It is impossible to be a stingy Christian. And to live the life that Jesus is calling us to live, we are a generous people. And so I want to move you to generosity. So earlier I mentioned that the springs remind me of giving. And we're at Wekiva Springs today in Florida, and what I love about the springs is how crystal clear the water is when the sun is shining. It's beautiful, the springs are refreshing, and it's just amazing. And that's because the water is constantly moving. That's what makes it so clear and beautiful. In Florida, we also have a lot of swamps, and swamps are the opposite of springs. Swamps are bacteria infested, they're nasty, they smell bad, and that's because the water is stagnant. It's not moving at all. And when it comes to a life of giving, what Jesus invites us to is a life of giving that far more depicts a spring than it does a swamp. But I think our culture naturally, we're inclined to live lives that are more resemble a swamp, that we become tight-fisted, and the more money that we have, the more accumulation that we have, we actually become greedier. We don't become any more generous. In fact, statistics tell you that the more money a person makes, the less percentage they give away. And that's extremely sad. What Jesus invites us to is a life of generosity, a life where we can actually give away money. And the cool thing about it is that when we give away our money, it goes places and it does things that we cannot do ourselves. And I believe that every move of God was started by at least one person, if not a group of people, being generous. If we truly want to see God do great things and change the picture we give of who Jesus is, then we must become a generous people. We must give far more like springs than swamps. So all through college and seminary, I kind of fell into a business where I was selling golf head covers. And it actually became a pretty profitable business for my wife and I, and so much so that we were selling 300 head covers a week, which was nuts. And we always had this dream of planting a church and growing God's kingdom that way. And all of a sudden, this very profitable business comes along. And so we really wrestled, especially at seminary as we got closer to finishing with the master's degree, of what do we want to do? Do we want to keep the business and just do really well and save up and then one day plant a church? Or do we want to plant a church now and give up the business? And actually, it worked out that God allowed us to do a bivocational ministry where, in other words, we had income from the business that would support us while we planted a church. And so it turned out to be a really cool thing, but it was super confusing at the time, I remember. And I don't advise you to do this, by the way, but it's one of the few times in life where I've made a deal with God. I said, okay, God, if you want me to keep this business and plant a church, then I want you to use my business of selling golf head covers. You know the little covers that go over the woods, that business. I want you to use that business to grow your kingdom. And I had no idea how God would do it. So we started meeting in home groups and planting this church in Mount Dora, Florida called The Cross. And we bought a little space that we were going to renovate to worship. And about a couple months away from worshiping together, there was a gentleman that emailed me and said, out of everybody in the world, you've got the only head cover I'm looking for. I remember it was a Cleveland Launcher 15-degree 3-wood head cover. And so I'd love to come pick it up from you. And so I didn't normally do pickups, but for whatever reason, my spirit was telling me, yeah, just have him meet you at the church and you can do it there and it'll be great. And so that's what happened. And he came and he saw we were a new church and he was interested, and so much so that he started coming to the church. And then about 2 months after we started worship, he took me out to lunch, and he said, we love what God is doing here at the Cross, and we'd love to help get the word out. You're a new church, and my wife and I would love to buy billboards for the church and put them all over town and let people know that the Cross is here. And so I said, man, that's amazing. How cool is that? And so for almost 6 years, we've had billboards in our community up that have been pointing people to come to our church. And what's most important about that is at the church, we point them to Jesus. And as I was reflecting back about this, I was thinking a couple things. Number one, how amazing is it that God actually answered my prayer, that he could turn selling golf head covers into growing his kingdom? But number two, and I remember talking with him a while ago, I said, how amazing is it that you have brought so many people into this church through your billboards? And we know that because we get connect cards every single week, and at least one every week has a little click mark by how'd you hear about us? It's billboards. And so I said to him, your money is going places and doing things that you never thought possible. And you won't even know this side of heaven how much you've impacted God's kingdom. And I think that's true whenever we're generous, whether it's billboards or something else. When we give money to grow God's kingdom, we don't know all that God is up to. But I believe he does powerful things, and he uses your dollars and your generosity, your faith-filled gifts, to truly bless and grow his kingdom. And so God invites you into a life of generosity. Jesus invites you to be not closed fist, but open-handed. He invites you to live a life much more like a spring than a swamp, where your money goes places and it does things. After all, it was Jesus that said, it's far more blessed to give than to receive. I hope that as we've spent a week serving using our hands and feet last week, that now we'll match that with our dollars. I hope that we don't stop short of what Jesus is asking us to do. And I believe that as we become generous, we will change the picture we give of who Jesus is.
He gets points for doing that like an ordinary Joe instead of somebody with a suit and tie.
He gets points for that.
I hope he does. I think he appeals to a lot more people that way in talking about it.
Sounds like somebody else you know that really likes it.
I'm not the one that's saying.
They don't want that suit and tie.
I'm not. All right. So one of the questions I have is, true prosperity is not how much we have, but how much we give. You agree or not with that statement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because your focus now is not on me.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, and so you're content with your life, and I mean, Rosie, but you know.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, that's good.
I think the definition of prosperity can play into that, because when I think of that, the alternative in my mind comes to the word richness. And while some people may not have a lot of money, they are rich in family, they are rich in friends and things like that.
Yeah.
So that plays into that thought too.
Well, and I think that idea of, I think some of that idea of prosperity is really, it's in your head, and being fine and realizing that you're okay. You know, because that's, I mean, you look at like Jeff Bezos now. You know, he's got more money than anyone else, and he's doing some interesting things with it. But like, you really think he could be doing something a little bit more for the people that work with him. You know, like that. That's like
I caught a news brief about an employer who, instead of taking his millions of dollars salary, decided that every single one of his workers had to be making at least $35,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
He literally, he's living on $70,000 a year.
Yeah.
And his employees are making from $35,000 up.
Mm-hmm.
And they said how it's changed the lives of these people. they joked over the fact that they had a baby boom.
Well, yeah.
Like half of his young employees all had children or bought homes or,
Yeah.
you know, and how it changed their lives. And he said when he did it, everybody in business said, what are you, crazy? You're going to be under, you know, you're going to go under in 6 months. He said, well, that was 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you think about the I don't know if they're instructors or business people or what, but I hear stories in 2 different cases about someone who is paid all of the tuition for nurses or doctors in at least 2 different locations so that they can get the education to help other people. And to me, that is such a pay it forward kind of thing that, you know, you just want to bless whoever did it so much.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. So that, no, those are great examples. And that's, I've heard of a few examples like that, and where the business actually ends up doing a lot better because the employees end up kind of,
they're happier.
They're happier.
They just went out and bought him a big luxury car.
yeah.
Everybody chipped in.
and so that's, you know, that's kind of, that's a cool way. It's a cool way of looking at it and realizing that you have enough. So let's see, if you got your Bibles, we can turn to Mark chapter 12. We kind of already talked about this, but I want to show you guys something I talked about actually in that sermon. Mark chapter 12, the very end of it. I'm going to start reading at verse 38. Okay. So Mark 12, chapter 12, begin with verse 38 is,
112.
as he taught, Jesus said, watch out for the teachers of the law, that they like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' homes and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely. I talked about this in the sermon, but when you hear that phrase that they like all the fancy stuff, and then all of a sudden it turns to they devour widows' homes. Like kind of what? It's a very interesting language all of a sudden there. Like what do you think? Why is that phrase in there? Why is that phrase in there?
The severity of it.
The severity of it?
I think they're trying to really show you how double-sided they are. How
Okay.
hypocritical
Yeah.
they are.
Devouring is something we use with animals.
Oh, animals?
Like a lion is
Like a vulture.
devouring its prey. It's such a greedy, negative, shove this in my mouth kind of, that's the way the word devour hits me.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Does it hit anyone else? Anyway, I think I always make the confirmation students sit on this verse for a little bit. Like what does that mean? Like that.
I looked at it as possibly we're going to foreclose on somebody.
Yeah.
In today's age,
Yeah.
That's it. They owe me $10 or $100,000 or whatever it is, and I'm taking their house. The hell with them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when Coley and I were talking about this, we were talking about the beginning of Elf, that Will Ferrell movie. I don't know. Do you guys? That's like the official movie of millennials, but that's like they show that he's bad because he works for a children's book publisher, and he's in the very beginning of it. The reason why he's on the naughty list is he's taking all the books away from this one orphanage, and so like that's over there. The thing we've been laughing about with Coley lately is that we're realizing that I live with Buddy the Elf. I don't know if you guys are like you look at all that stuff that she built out there, like for that Harry Potter thing. Like she, like that's like it's I live with Buddy the Elf.
But you love it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah. So that's. But yeah, that's what she and I really think. Like, because I think it's a nun. It's like, but the children love the books. I think they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to. But I think it goes back, Dwayne. I think your whole thing about foreclosure or just, I look at payday loan places and how tolerant the authorities are of letting them run their business in peace, because those places are all just scams and all of that. And and I think when you look at a society that's okay with those being around, like that's, and I think it's evidence of the problem, and we're all involved in that a little bit. But so he goes right from devour widows' homes and make lengthy prayers, all that stuff. And then it says, verse 41, and Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put in and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in just 2 very small copper coins, worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she out of her poverty and put in everything, all she had to live on. Let's see. Have you ever had to give sacrificially or give out of your poverty, like what Jesus says?
Not and go hungry.
Not and go hungry. Yeah.
My friend on that, she's still doing that, and she's still suffering.
Yeah.
They were going to turn her water off yesterday, her electric off a couple of days ago. They already shut off her cable and TV, and he lost his job. She had so many ills, and she's fallen, and now she's suffering from a concussion and eye changes and headaches, and they ruled out, thank the Lord, she doesn't have COVID, but she's still giving to people down the street and neighbors and whatnot. If she's not, she wants to go out and garden for them, even though hurting, bending, everything is. She tried to mow the lawn and the lawnmower wouldn't start, and I kept telling her, God's giving you messages. Listen.
Yeah.
But she finally is a little bit. And she's taking care of our 91-year-old mom who's in kidney failure.
Yeah.
She's a transplant. They won't do anything else for her.
Yeah.
She's at home.
Mm-hmm.
She falls too, and every time she falls, there's a try to get her up, and that hurts her even.
Oh, goodness.
Well, I remember a time, both Cheryl and I went to church quite regularly, and the kids were really little, and it was kind of short that payday, and we invaded the kids' piggy banks to get $10 to give to the church.
Oh.
So, well, the church and the kids have been paid well over the $10 at our age, but it was one of those that it brought up a memory back then that, sometimes when you're young and the kids are young, and you're not making a lot of money back then, and you're just getting started, it was kind of tough. And I look around the room and the people here, we're up in our ages. We've peaked out and in our careers and that, and now we could help our children and that and give them back their $10 again.
Yeah. Like that's an interesting story. Yeah.
When I was little, my parents would, and when my mom was home, when we would go to church on Sundays and Sunday school before that, if we were around the table and my dad said, who wants to earn a quarter so they can put it in the offering plate on Sunday? And my brother and I both, my little sister, of course, didn't have any idea. She was still a toddler. Yeah. My brother and I go, like that, okay, well, you can do that if you wipe the table off and clear the dishes. And then she'd tell him, you can do that by taking the garbage outside. Stuff like that we do. That's how it made us feel like we were contributing and not getting it for nothing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was embedded in us as kids, I think.
Yeah. That's your parents
And
teaching us
corporate
sanctification right there. Right? Like that's, yeah. Like how to live. That's good. That's good. The thing I want to point out next is as Jesus, it's the very next line down. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, look what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. Do you see all these great buildings?" Replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." Like what I kind of think that chapter change is kind of unfortunate there. Because like when you allow it all to kind of go, the disciples, you can tell, aren't getting what Jesus was saying. They're still looking at all this physical stuff we have and going, that's the way. That's the way. And so like, and he's like, it's all going to be cast down. And it really makes me think about, like I talked a lot about it while we were building this whole building, but the whole idea, like it could all go away. And what do we lose? And if you can honestly say nothing, because if this all collapses, it all goes away, I'll probably get a job somewhere else. So you guys go somewhere else to church, all that stuff. Like sometimes we put all this stuff with a ton of emphasis on it, and it's like, I think we'll be okay at the end of the day, and like even if I lose my house and all that stuff, like it's all that it'll be sad. I'm not saying that it won't be sad or anything, but I think it'll be okay.
We still have potential.
Yeah.
I see it go to like one door may shut, but another one open.
Yeah. And I think, and it doesn't mean that things won't be difficult and all of that, but I think that's what it is. And so, and I think there's freedom in that then. There's freedom in that you're not always having to protect and get, and all that stuff, that you're able to be a little bit more, you want to run things well, but you're not always just trying to protect the stones, that you can go, it's time to look past all this. It's time to look past. Time to do something new, So,
my dad used to have a phrase, it's like squeezing blood out of a turnip.
Yeah.
When you try to do something to the degree.
Let's look at Acts chapter 4. Acts chapter 4. He has this beginning of verse 32. I'm probably going to reference just a little bit before that. Acts chapter 4. So this is after Peter, does this big sermon at the beginning of Acts, and the Spirit comes down, and all these things start happening, and they're all praying together and meeting, and everyone's shaken and filled with the Holy Spirit. And we get to verse 32. And all the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions were their own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And God's grace was so powerfully at work in them all that there were no needy persons among them. For from time to time, those who owned the land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the apostles' feet. And it was distributed to anyone who had need. Then Barnabas, son of encouragement, they sowed a field of their own and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. So we're going to continue looking at the next story here in a second, but Is this possible today? That's, like,
It'd be pretty tough.
yeah,
Part of it sounds like socialism.
yeah. And that's when we start getting our modern political notions all involved.
They refer to that and go, see?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, if we put the rubber where the road is, in our understanding of this, I mean, there's all these people realize at this point in time that they were okay, and they're able just to give. And they knew that if they gave everything, someone else is going to have their back too, and that's difficult.
Sometimes I have to ask if people were more trusting of God providing for them back then than they are now.
Well, I think right here they probably were, which that's we'll talk about that here in a second. But yeah, that's a good question. Like, how, the question here is, how would our lives be different if we gave more? And I think it was one of your two's language that she said, I think we could say if we trusted more. How would things be different, do you think?
Would they more?
Mm-hmm.
I think in the end, we would be more blessed. We just don't see it right at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow we have to figure that, if there's a need, there's a reason to help. And there's any way you can do it, you help.
Yeah.
Even if it means stretching yourself,
Yeah.
you try to do that. That's the way
Why do you think it's hard?
When we
I
lost the
think we have
sense,
too much. That's why it's too hard.
Yeah.
when we lost the sense of community.
Lost a sense of community.
Yeah, if you
Right.
look at
You don't have the neighbors.
the move
that you
west.
had when you were
Okay.
young. No way.
You had a group of people and they were in a small area,
Mhm.
and if they didn't help each other, they wouldn't have survived.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, it wasn't, I'm just going to build my farm. It was, if I don't help Joe build his barn,
Exactly.
I'll be here alone. He'll leave. So there was a sense of belonging. And
Well,
Yeah, the farming community form.
yeah,
that's something. So there was a lady that was coming to the church for a while before the pandemic, and I get to talk to her. I got to get a haircut really bad. But I remember when I first talked to her, she goes, "Oh, you don't have to give me. You're the pastor of the church." It's just like, no, but I do. And we kind of talked about vocation, and it's like, if I just take this for free, and you have to move in order to take another job somewhere else, I lose my haircuts. And like when she put that together, she goes, it changed my entire outlook on all of that stuff. Because I can't remember who gave me that outlook, but someone gave me that outlook on like, yeah, you're not constantly looking for the best deal. You're not constantly looking for all of that. You're looking for community betterment and where you're spending your money and all that stuff. And that's hard sometimes, that's hard to know where that is and to figure it out. And sometimes I'm better at it than others. Sometimes I get a little high on that and I try to stop ordering from Amazon. but that's
hard.
yeah. But then you go back because it's easier, and they're hiring a bunch of local people too. But it's I don't know. I kind of view that as giving as well. Yeah, that's I'm not just trying to get a deal for myself. That I'm trying to be there for the other person. Yeah, that's I don't know. Like that's.
Shopping local plays into that some too.
Yeah. And I also think, I talked about this on 2 Saturdays ago, and you and Dwayne were both there. We're talking about give us this day our daily bread. And when we think about that, what that means, like that's like when I go and buy a soda from the Wawa and stuff like that, I'm supporting Mike, Mike, her grandson-in-law. There we go. Like that.
The Pepsi-Cola man.
The Pepsi-Cola man, like the Pepsi-Cola man. And so we're supporting that, but also you think about, how it takes how do you get there? You got to drive on the road. What did it take to get roads there? What did it take to get the soda there? Think about all the natural resources that went into making that product and the packaging, and then not to mention all the resources it takes to deal with the trash that we produce now. And like that one thing that I bought, how many people indirectly touched it? Hundreds?
Thousands.
And I think when you look at it that way, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm part of this whole system. That it's not just me. I may be buying a Pepsi, which as a guy from Atlanta, that's hard to say. I might be buying a Pepsi, but we're helping the whole system, and I think that's part of it too. I think it's good to recognize that. So the very next story after this is Ananias and Sapphira. And you guys are all familiar with Ananias and Sapphira. We won't have to read it. That's a very weird story. Like that, the story it makes me very uncomfortable, and I kind of don't know how to teach it. But I think it's there to show you, they have this like almost utopian thing going on, and all of a sudden there's this wild story that drives it to a halt. That's where they're being just selfish. They're lying.
Don't you think the lying had a big part in that one?
Oh yeah, I think so.
They're trying to look good.
But notice it doesn't talk about them living like this after that.
No.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, like that's and that's was that did all of a sudden sin get thrust in and all that. And then when you also think about it, so in Acts chapter 2, they're speaking in tongues of all the nations and everything, and it's almost like God is sending them out into the world. But did they leave? No.
Not right away.
What caused them to leave? Persecution did. Like it's a like, and so like that's like and so like it's over. It's this whole sense of this book. It mirrors the Gospels, and I think this book shows us that there was probably a good way to go, and we didn't go that direction. We kind of followed our own sin, and it gets all the way to the end of it where there's another crucifixion, and it's Paul's shipwreck. And we see that God brings restoration and resurrection into even the times of the church too. And that's, I think, is a good way to remember this, because there can be a lot of law in our giving, which I was kind of worried with some of this kind of coming towards the end of it. There can be a lot of law in our giving, and I think it's good to give. And I think that utopic sense there is kind of a goal, and I think we're looking forward to that in the kingdoms to come. But I think it's also saying a sense that God continually to give, even if we face tragedy or hurt in our lives, when we face the crucifixion, that He still leads us and guides us through it all. And that we can rest in Him. I think that's what Acts is about. But I think it's interesting that when the church was doing it, then all of a sudden sin came in. And we see that they weren't even doing what they were supposed to do. They were just hanging out together in a nice little commune down by the river, right? Like that. And they weren't actually going into the world. And something kind of thrust them into that.
Don't you think sometimes we take Satan too lightly? that he's actually out there like a roaring lion, like they say, and he's trying to stop all the good.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that gets put to the side.
Yeah. And I think I think a lot of that is that sense that it's, oh, you may lose everything. You know, you better hoard. You know, you better be just glad with what you have, type of, like in like a negative sense, and not being content, but just, you know, that's, you don't want anything to change.
A lot more.
Yeah. And so I think it's all part of that. And I was trying to bring some hope in at the end of it with like the book of Acts. God continues to lead us and guide us through, even if we haven't been the most righteous. And he continues to lead and guide. So I think that it's important to look at our giving as like, okay, this is good that I'm giving here. And we should strive to give more, but also know that God is even redeeming our times in our lives when we haven't been as good as we could. So,
well, it's most of the time.
That's most of the time, right? It's most of the time. And so, like, I think that's a good way of talking about giving there. Did anyone have any last thoughts or anything? Any prayer requests also?
Has anyone heard from, here we go again.
Susan?
No. Should have thought about it before I said something. Forget it, it'll come to me. Pat Hesse.
Oh, Pat Hesse. I have not talked to Pat Hesse in
Yeah, I was wondering about her on the way here, but I thought we were being recorded, so I didn't say.
Yeah, I haven't heard from her in a week. So.
Yeah, because I had sent a card and I had called and I hadn't heard anything. So
yeah. Also, we have a new case of COVID in the church. It's someone that you guys probably. They haven't come a lot, but it's the Duesbergs. He is a comedian who does like conferences and things like that. They haven't come much. I know who they are pretty well, and but they have COVID right now, so we want to keep them in prayer. They were part of the Redeemer bunch that kind of came up, and they have. About the same time, they had like a small child and like didn't know quite what to do with the child in service and things like that. If you guys saw them, you'd probably recognize them. Let's see who else is going on. Anything else? Well, good deal. Well, we will say a prayer. Jesus, we thank you for today and all the good things that you've given us. Lord, continue to be with with the group here, with the church, that we continue to have a spirit of generosity as we go out into the world, that we would not seek on hoarding and gaining more for ourselves, but we would continue to give out of all the great gifts that you've given us. Lord, continue to be with all those that are shut in and hurt right now. Continue to be with them and help them see that we are with them and that you are constantly healing and guiding them up, Lord. And Father, just continue to be with our good partners in Alzheimer's community care and lead them as they continue to provide such a need. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.